Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Well, the first step to change is admitting that you need to change and why. And if you're looking around your living space, your workspace, and you're seeing a mess, clutter, disorganization, it's time for a change. We're going to walk you through the whole process of working with a professional organizer and really setting those steps in motion. But she's different than your average organizer because she looks at the reasons why you may be messy, if you will, and how that connects to your emotions and everything else going on with you. Learned a lot even so far. Going to learn a lot more today. Emily Guderian is with us. How are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. It's nice to see you.
I tell people about you very often because you are very different. Yes, you're an organizer, CEO of a company, but you do it for different reasons in terms of helping people move their lives forward. Cut the clutter, but also figure out why the clutter is there, and that invariably moves their life forward. We'll get to that in a moment. I just hired you. How does this whole process work?
Well, if you've hired me, bless your heart, you've gone through a whole lot of stuff to get to that point, for sure. There's you gotta get to this place where you can trust somebody because you've got an
Mm.
organizer coming in, they're all up in your personal stuff, and there's a little bit of vulnerability that you might feel.
Oh, for sure. And there could be decades of attachment to all this stuff. We'll call it that.
Right.
By the way, it always reminds me every time we talk about it. George Carlin, loved him. He was a genius in terms of
Yes.
comedy. He did a whole bit on a place for your stuff. Like everybody's got a place for their
Oh, I
stuff.
gotta go look at that. I'm not familiar with this.
Definitely. I don't know if there's a video, but there's definitely audio around there. And even as a kid, I would listen to it and laugh because it's so relatable. Everybody's got a place. You got to have a place for your stuff.
You gotta have a
So
place.
we've made that decision to be vulnerable, allow you into our space. Um, some
You
of those,
decided you've had enough, like you can't do this one more day longer.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Now what do we do?
So we're here and you don't really know what to expect. There's a lot of folks out there that kind of put organizers in the same space as house cleaners because really you're just
Yeah.
moving stuff around. Maybe a few things get cleaned, a few other things go off to donation. What's the big deal? But there are a whole lot of other skills that are at play with an organizer. So it's a little bit of a different price point for sure. But and the skills, like there's a spatial analysis that every organizer will do. And organizers get really good at knowing, okay, I think that will fit in that space and that will not fit in that space, and we need to edit or downsize. So there's spatial analysis that's happening. There's a creation of systems. There's a rezoning that's happening. There's all of this application of different skills that are at play. So once you get to that point where you're seeing all of the elements that are in effect for organizing, we're ready to go.
Hmm.
So what you can expect is you'll spend a little bit of time with an organizer because an organizer, every organizer, they're not going to get rid of anything unless you're on board with it. Um,
Okay. Well,
you,
thank you for
you
saying
have
that
to make
because
that decision.
that alleviates some of the fear and anxiety
Right,
where, you know, I'm going to come home and that humble that I had on the counter is gone. It's like
right.
you're not gonna purge without permission.
No, and in that way, I'm no different than every other organizer out there. Any organizer with integrity is going to make sure that you understand what goes, what stays, and nothing moves unless we have your approval with it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So hopefully that eliminates that whole, at least one element, one aspect of the whole fear conversation. You can expect that you're going to have to part with some things. And that's another skill set that is employed by an organizer. We're going to help you walk through that separation process. And depending on the client, depending on the item, depending on the history of that item and the client, you never know how long or what that experience is going to look like in,
Hmm.
saying goodbye to an item or deciding that it stays.
And we work through the process of that. What do I mean? Let's do this. Okay.
Uh-huh.
I've had this for 2 decades. I've had it on a shelf. It's been there for as far as I can remember. I can't part with it. You see it in your mind. Let's be honest here. You're looking at it as like, why do you have that? What we need to get rid of that. It's in the middle of nowhere. Why are we doing this? Interact with me. Role play. What
All
are we
right.
doing? What are we doing?
Well, this is where I get real different real quick, because I to help both of us understand what's in your best interest.
Mm-hmm.
So, muscle testing is based on the premise that the muscles of the body are strong in the presence of anything that promotes health, well-being, and is truth or in your best interest. And then on the flip side, the muscles are weak for not truth, for something that doesn't benefit you or isn't in your best interest. So I'm going to have you hold that cup in one hand. I'm going to have you hold the other arm out straight. And I'm going to apply pressure
that.
one way. Yep. And you're going to resist the pressure. If the muscle gives, and you'll feel it, like you'll be thinking that I'm pushing on your arm harder than I am. If your arm gives, then it's a weak response. It's not in your best interest. Now, you still have the ability to choose whether or not you keep it. But now all parts of you, your mind and your body, are aware that it's not in your best interest to keep it. Or the other side of that is that stays strong. And for whatever reason, that item, it is in your best interest to keep. It may be junk to anybody else, but for you, it symbolizes something else, something that is good and powerful and moves you along in your purpose. And so we keep it. In fact, we make a home for that if it tests strong. And that's where I'm very different. I'm
You're
going to
very
use that
different.
muscle testing tool.
You're very different. And I believe at this point, we should explain a little bit deeper for anybody who may not have heard it in the past, what the muscle testing is actually doing.
The muscle testing is bypassing the conscious ego mind, the mind that uses logic to assign meaning to things. We bypass that. We go to that part of you that operates every single system of your body, the part that does the involuntary breathing and the heartbeat and regulates the blood and all the body systems. That part of you that is connected with all of humanity, that's connected with the divine, and it filters out nothing. Like the ego mind, the conscious mind will filter. The true self, the unconscious mind, is tracking everything. So muscle
Wow.
testing bypasses the filter and goes right to the part that knows exactly what's going on. It's kind of, it's actually quite remarkable. It's extraordinary in what we can access for individuals using muscle testing, energetically and in all other ways.
Wow. So I'm
excited about this. I love this aspect of organizing. I really do.
Oh, yes, because it gets to the core of what's important and what's not, but truly the core, not this getting in the way.
Right. And it gets in the way a lot.
Oh, totally. And I'm fully on board for all of this. I've seen it work. What I find, and I don't dispute it whatsoever, I just had a Reiki session, i.e., energy healing for anybody that doesn't know, last weekend. What a reset button.
Right.
And it was remote. That's why I'm bringing it up. It was remote. I'm telling you, when I went to bed that night, the practitioner was done 9 o'clock. I went to bed like 10 something. And oh my God, the dreams I had the next day, the feeling I had, the clarity, the calmness, just an example of how this energy thing all works. What intrigues me the most about what you do here is that you're able to muscle test remotely. Like you said, item would be maybe in one hand. I'm extending an arm the other way. You're going to, by proxy, push down on my arm. And that's going to, in the core of me is going to tell you and me whether I really need this item or not. That's
right.
I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds crazy, but it's been proven before. It works. Is it even possible? I mean, I don't have, there's items around here that I would say I would need to keep, but even something facetiously like this cup of coffee. Could we even do that right now where you know, spot the BS in me?
Yeah. So I wouldn't actually crank your arm remotely because, geography, that becomes a problem. So what I do is I'll take my left hand and I'll make a circle,
Oh,
make
we're going to
a
do it that
loop.
way. Okay.
Right. So I use my middle finger and my thumb. And then because I want to make really sure, I'll put this ring finger
Oh,
on top of it. And then I'll use the forefinger, the front finger of the other hand, and all the way to this joint. And I'll put it in. If I can run it through, that's a weak response. If it holds, that's a strong response. And so I can do it so you can see it, or I can do it down here. Either way, that's what I'm doing remotely. If I get a strong response, if the finger holds, then keep the 7-Eleven cup. And if we get a weak response, then it's time to say goodbye. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we move on to the next item.
I wish we could do this with an item that you don't know has value or not, because that would be the true test. Because obviously, I don't need this cup. Well, I do. It's got about that much coffee in it, but
Right. And you need that.
you need that. But if I picked another item around here, and I'm not home, and there are things around here that do have value.
Mhm.
But it would be cool to
Right.
do a legit test where you don't
Legit
know
test.
whether it has value to me or not.
Right.
Um, hmm, yeah. Office is there. I have to go in there and I have to look around to find something. But
So is that the challenge for next time that you're going to
maybe,
find that
maybe
item
yeah,
and we're going to, okay.
maybe it was. And I might have a few items, and be warned, they may look like I need them, but they could be garbage, and you're not gonna know. I
No,
may.
and I never make a judgment. I mean, even on the
No,
Seven
that's not
Eleven
it.
cup, like I never make a judgment.
Well, thanks for saying that.
There's something there that I'm not aware of. And so that's why we appeal to the muscle testing. And
Thanks for
it's kind
saying
of
that.
awesome because I don't have to be the bad guy. Like the client feels whether it's a strong or a weak response. And so then it becomes it empowers them more in the process because I'm not the bad guy. I'm just telling you, this is what your body is saying, and like if it's strong, if it's weak.
Hmm. Well,
And
I'll have you
actually, I
know.
didn't plan on doing that. I kind of stumbled on that technique with one of my clients. I haven't always used it. It's kind of been an evolution. And the brilliant thing about this evolution is for the clients that are open to the energy side of organizing, I don't go back. Like we go through things, we walk through the emotional triggers for the clutter in the first place, we release it, and then whatever system we put in place, it stays in place. Now, I have a client and we didn't do the energy work. I was too new in the business. I didn't know to apply the energy work in that case. This
Hmm.
client, bless her little heart, is back in clutter again. So, yeah, maybe it's not the best business model, but business is really set up so that I can benefit and you can benefit. So, you benefit if I don't have to come back, and it benefits you in crazy ways. This
Hmm.
spillover effect is it's hard to quantify the spillover effect of an organized space.
Well, what's really cool is you don't have to do this process. You could just help somebody
Yeah.
organize. Let's say, and I'm fully on board for the energy thing.
All right.
Psyche is one modality that uses muscle testing, and that's been all of this has been tested. It's all been proven. But you know what? Let's say I was somebody who is steadfast. Listen, Emily, I don't believe any of this. This whole
Yeah.
energy stuff is bunk. Waste of time. I just want to declutter. We could approach it that way,
Mhm.
and you wouldn't even do any muscle testing, any of that. You would just ask, all right, that cup that's on that mantle, do you really need that cup? Well, yes, I do. This is the first cup I ever drank coffee from 30
It
years
means the
ago.
world to me.
It means the world to me. I still remember it. I still use the same cup. There's, 6 billion pieces of bacteria since that first day in here, and I don't really care. Whatever it might be, but that's somebody's excuse. They're
For
feeling,
sure.
and that's it. That's it. So
Yeah.
two ways to look at it, which is kind of cool. I would definitely go with the energy side because as we talked, and you verified it in what I believe that we're not all slobs. We're
Mm-mm.
we're messy for a reason.
Right. Right. And sometimes the mess is just everywhere. It invades every space of your home. Other times there's just one particular spot, whether it's the garage or a craft room or one particular closet. Clutter is almost insidious in all the different ways it shows up. So an entire home or just one chronically
Yeah.
cluttered space, it's disruptive. It still kind of affects the way that space functions, and it affects your general peace and harmony.
Would you say that all of us, and I truly mean all of us, the reason that we're disorganized in some regard, some larger degree, some less degree, disorganized, cluttered, is always something connected to unresolved emotions, energy. There's a reason. And I'm not giving everybody an excuse. I'm a mess because something's going on in my head. It's because that's why we are messy. That's what I'm saying.
That's been I don't want to come out there and say 100% of the time in every single case, but I will say in my experience, every single case, every single home that has clutter, there is something that's stuck. And what's really interesting is if I were
Mm.
to say that to somebody, they would probably give me what is stuck, and it's almost always not the case. It's almost always something different than what that person thinks. And that's
Wow.
fascinating too.
Wow. Like, for example, somebody could say, and I'm being very hypothetical here, but somebody could say, well, the reason I'm a mess here is because of a divorce. Everything was upturned, but it may not be that. It could be the passing of a parent 20 years before that is still stuck. You haven't resolved it. Again, not easy, none of this, but you haven't come to terms with it. Maybe you buried it. And that's kind of piloting a lot of your life.
Right. Right. I had a client where there was grief connected to a lot of things, a lot of the clutter that was in her home. And so I'm sure she's thinking, grief. But we start digging, we start spending time together, and I know it's not the grief. I'm hearing something completely different. In fact, the core root emotion for the clutter was vulnerability, was betrayal by people that she trusted. It wasn't the grief at all. Like the body,
Wow.
the mind, the psyche, the heart, it knew how to grieve instinctively. What was tripping her up was that betrayal that she didn't
Mm.
expect and that caught her at a very vulnerable time.
So let's do the connection here. So
Okay.
she's got betrayal and it's unresolved. How does that translate to the clutter? How does the clutter support her and that challenge?
It becomes a way where she doesn't have to deal with it, or it becomes a way that she walls and protects. I mean, these are all subconscious suppositions, but it's either a way to delay or procrastinate or put it off altogether, dealing with that yucky, painful, negative stuff, or it's a way to you
Cope.
know outlet.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I could almost hear potentially that person saying, well, yeah, my life's a mess. Everything's a mess here, because they don't want to deal with what's over here. Maybe their subconscious saying, that betrayal,
Right.
that hurt, that was bad. But
Well,
you're
what was so interesting, it was anger, like this red hot rage that she was experiencing. And when we experience
mm,
anger, we like to make ourselves wrong or bad for experiencing anger. So even more, she would want to
mm,
shut that down. So what we did is we let go of the rage, we let go of the anger and all of her judgments and condemnations of herself for experiencing rage and anger in that moment. And
wow,
that was I mean, you could almost feel the 4 tires go flat with that. It just, ooh, took the air and the charge out of that whole home and that space very quickly. We let the anger
wow.
go.
Would you would you say that anger manifests other things? It's not anger. We don't typically we have it's not anger. It's sadness, it's many other emotions, but it just happens to be showing up as anger.
Anger actually happens a lot more frequently than you would think. And in our society, we make ourselves wrong for anger. Anger is a lower emotion, so if you're feeling it, then something's wrong with you. There's the whole Christian set of value systems around anger. We make ourselves wrong for anger, and then anger gets shoved down, pushed down, manipulated, and then it kind of shows up in all different kinds of weird ways.
Mm.
Anger shows up really for, that true self part of us that we were talking about. Anger shows up when boundaries are violated, or when the true self is telling you something and you're ignoring it. That's the two reasons why anger shows up. And that's not a bad thing, but we will make ourselves bad. We will judge and condemn ourselves for being bad if we experience anger.
Is anger ever anger?
Well, that's a really good question. Sometimes, but I think I think I know what you're saying.
Is it driven by something else, or can it just be pure, I'm angry?
It's the
I'm angry.
backside of fear.
I made you think for a sec. Now I have to think for a sec. The
No,
backside
I
fear.
love the question, because now we get to explore, and I got to think about that. But usually I would say fear is on the backside of anger. Fear shows up a lot.
Yeah.
I think
It
most of us are fear driven at some level. I know
deeply.
for myself, fear
Oh,
is one
oh,
thing that I constantly bump up against.
oh, but that's our anxiety and fear.
Right.
It's major, and it's
Yeah.
there evolutionary wise
Yeah.
to protect us. And the what we just talked here about at this moment, I will need to think about this and apply it to situations. You could be angry, somebody did something, but are you really just purely angry, or is there something else? Somebody cut you off in traffic, you're angry. Why are you angry? Think about that for a moment. You're angry because you thought you were going to crash. Fear. There you go.
Or there's a fear that maybe you weren't in the right in the first place, because a lot of us love to be right.
Okay, we'll
So
go.
wait, he cut me off. Wait, I'm in the right. I'm in the lane. I had the right of way.
Right,
So
right.
there could be like a pride and a
Uh-huh.
rightness connection to
Uh-huh.
that as well.
Or you're angry because somebody cut you off because you your space was violated and your control was taken away
Right.
for that split second.
Right. You're entitled to that space, and somebody,
Right, right.
crowded that space.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Gonna,
fascinating.
it's
Pride
gonna,
shows up. Like, we can end in this physical mortal
I
realm,
think
we are never getting rid of pride. That's always a given.
totally. And ego ego comes into play a lot here.
Right.
We're going to end on this point. We're out of time, and now we need to think about it because I'm gravitating toward. I don't know if you could just be anger. I don't know if anger can be just anger. There's something else driving the emotion of anger. Something else. There's something next to it. Sadness is sadness. I'm sad. That happened.
Right.
Um, this
Anger
using
is absolutely multifaceted for sure.
it really
But I'm
is.
thinking there's a fear connection. So that's going to be my vote, is I'm thinking there's a fear connection.
I'm thinking I need to think.
For sure.
And
And I love
yes,
these conversations, man. This exploration is wonderful.
there's going to be a fear component, but is it always going to be there? I would need to think about that.
For
Uh,
sure.
this is
Something for
such
next time.
Emily, such a different approach to organizing, but it's not just the items and the stuff around your
Mm-mm.
home. It's decluttering you. That's what we're talking about. The end result is you, and the rest of the stuff follow. How do we find you? How do we connect?
You can find me on the socials on Instagram and Facebook. It's at Built to Be Visible. My website is builttobevisible.com. And you can always call me, area code 480-221-8874.
In a roundabout way, you make the true emotions visible, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, there's a story behind the name too. So bless that.
Well, we'll get to that next time and we'll muscle
For
test
sure.
if that's possible, right?
You got it.
Very cool. All right, we'll catch up next time.
Thanks, Steve.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.